If they're not, it's usually people like 76-year-old Clara Mahoney who catch them. She began to notice all sorts of crazy things turning up on her quarterly Medicare statements back in 2003. Things that Medicare paid for on her behalf and that she never ordered, never wanted, and never received.
What kind of things?
Oh, air mattresses, a wheelchair, urine bag for my leg. Was getting so I didn't want to open up the explanation of benefits because, you know, it was like, oh no, not again.
Mahoney, who says she hasn't been sick in 30 years, began calling Medicare to tell them that someone was ripping them off. But the only responses she received were letters saying that someone was looking into it. The bogus charges are still turning up on her statements.
And I continued to report, and I kept saying, can't you flag my account? You know, I'm not getting any equipment or supplies, nothing.
So how many years have they been looking at it?
6 years.
Once criminals like Tony get their hands on usable patient numbers, they try and charge Medicare for the most expensive equipment possible, which requires having access to a list of Medicare codes.
And what were some of the best codes?
Artificial limbs, electric arms, electric wheelchairs. A regular patient, you can put them 2 artificial legs and an artificial arm, and they'll pay for it.
And that's what happened to former federal judge Ed Davis. He was one of those patients who started getting charges on his Medicare statement for artificial limbs.
I looked at it, and it had charges for a prosthesis, and I knew I had my arms.
Did you get the left arm and the right arm on the same bill?
Both arms, same bill, yeah.
And you obviously have 2 good arms.
The same ones I've had for over 70 years.
Didn't anybody at Medicare check to see if any of these charges were valid?
Sometimes they'll do, but by the time they did it, it was too late.
Too late?
Yeah, we already made $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 on it. And then we will never send them nothing back. And then in 30 days, they'll send an inspector to your office, and by that time,
it's all closed down.
It's all closed down.
So they would pay first and audit later?
Yes.
There's something I don't understand. I mean, you're saying essentially people just fill out the phony paperwork. They send a bill to Medicare, and they pay it.
That's why you have companies that can run for 60 and 90 days and bill for ridiculous things, because there are very few checks and balances to even determine whether these things, A, were medically necessary, B, were ever given, or C, even physically possible for a patient with the kind of conditions they have.
The FBI calls it pay and chase, and riding around with them, we saw plenty of examples. This tiny pharmacy in a Hialeah strip mall went from billing Medicare $13,000 in May to billing nearly $1 million a month later.
This place billed $800,000 in the month of June?
Correct.
It's a pretty small place.
By the time we were there in August, the FBI says the owners had already burned the company, shut it down, and moved on to another operation.
We were here last week. It was, there was stuff on the shelves. The business still had a name on it. You can still see from where the tape is that someone just took this off.
To understand just how preposterous all of this is, the FBI says that this tiny little store collected 6 times more money from Medicare in June than the largest Walgreens pharmacy in the state of Florida. Quite an achievement, since neither the FBI nor the proprietor of the bingo parlor next door ever saw a customer coming or going.
What's the deal with the pharmacy?
I've never seen people only twice.
No customers?
No customers. It's always been locked.
We obviously had a few questions to ask of the people at Medicare and requested an interview with the person in charge of preventing fraud. That turned out to be Kim Brandt, Medicare's Director of Program Integrity.
We went around with an FBI agent and a woman from Health and Human Services. They took us to storefront after storefront after storefront, billing $300,000 or $400,000 a month, and they were completely empty. Nobody there. I mean, how did they get away with that?
We're as frustrated by that as the law enforcement officials that you went out with. And in fact, our primary focus over the past 2 years has been to tighten our enrollment standards to make it so it's much harder for people like that to be able to get in the program and to be able to commit that kind of fraud.
Look, I'm sure that you're aware of these problems, but it doesn't seem like you're doing a very good job. I don't mean you personally, but I mean the government. This is still like a huge problem and getting worse, right?
Well, it really does come down to the size and scope of the Medicare program and the resources that are dedicated to oversight and anti-fraud work. One of our biggest challenges has been that we have a program that pays out over 1 billion claims a year, over $430 billion, and our oversight budget has been extremely limited.
About that, there is little dispute. Medicare has just 3 field inspectors in all of South Florida to check up on thousands of questionable medical equipment companies.
Clearly, more auditing needs to be done, and it needs to be done in real time.
Why is it taking Medicare so long to figure out they were being scammed?
I think lack of resources, probably. And then I think people, I don't think, necessarily thought that something as well-intentioned as Medicare and Medicaid would necessarily attract fraudsters. But I think we have to understand that it certainly has.
The Obama administration is providing Medicare with an additional $200 million to fight fraud as part of its stimulus package, and billions of dollars to computerize medical records and upgrade networks should help Medicare catch more phony charges. But Tony, who has just begun serving his 12-year prison sentence, says there's no shortage of people in Miami waiting to take his place.
How many people in Miami were doing this?
I say at least 2,000 people. At least 2,000, 3,000 companies.
Well, presumably some of them are going to be legitimate.
I say less than 5%.
Less than 5%?
Yes.
If I went to the phone books and looked under medical equipment suppliers, 95% of the companies would be phony?
Yes, sir.